think at one time or another we've all questioned as to whether all that we see and are experiencing in our world has some sort of a rational plan behind it, because we understand now that both the Republican and the Democratic Party in our country are basically run by the same people. The same money finances both sides. We now know, of course, through the work of many historians who have spent their life working on research to show us that both sides of world conflicts have always been financed by the same people. And as I've said before, there seems to be a method to the madness going on in the world. We know, of course, that we cannot depend on our leaders. Our leaders are misleaders. There is a science that they're following. They have their own agenda, and it doesn't include you.
But around about 300 years ago, 1776, a character called Amsel Rothschild decided to set up an organization which he called the Bavarian Illuminati. And the intention of this organization was to take over the world. This is what was written into the original documents to set up this Bavarian Illuminati. And recognizing that there was some kind of power base beginning to build here, the Velon, or the Anunnaki who had moved to Tibet, took over this organization. Now the way in which they did this is again requires a long explanation as to the kind of technology the Velon have available to them. But essentially they took over total control of the Illuminati virtually from its inception. This they did as much on a psychic level as on a physical level. The way in which they took over the Illuminati was what psychics would describe as a walk-in. Now that is where one soul walks into somebody's body, and in doing so displaces the soul that was in there originally. It's a bit of a bizarre concept, but it's one which the Anunnaki used to take over the Illuminati. Because by doing so they convinced Rothschild that they were an immensely powerful race of beings and could provide whatever energy potential the Illuminati required to carry out their plans. Again, you've got to remember everything is energy. So if you have a massive energy potential, then you can manipulate anything that you choose to manipulate. And this is what Rothschild took on board, because the body that was taken over was the person he had chosen to be the leader of the physical leader of the Illuminati, with Rothschild in the background. This is a guy called who's been nicknamed Spartacus, I seem to remember. And from that point onwards, it meant that the Anunnaki had full control of the activity of the Illuminati and all of their activities. And because I think a lot of it's to do with the fact that the aims of the Illuminati and the aims of the Anunnaki are the same, which is control of the human population on the planet. And this is what they set about doing. I mean, the first thing the Illuminati did was to set up the French Revolution, to depose the monarchy within France and take control of the people through, a socialist ideal. This obviously failed, and essentially the Illuminati were thrown out of Europe because the other heads or monarchs of various other countries in Europe didn't want them there any longer, so it became very difficult for Rothschild to operate within that sort of climate. So what the Illuminati did was to move to America. And again, at the time, what they did was the Illuminati took over the Freemasons, and they re-established the Knights Templar. Because when I started my healing work and my psychic work, what I found was that I was hardwired into an aspect of the human mass consciousness that is traditionally known as the Akashic. Now, the Akashic is the record-keeping aspect of the human mass consciousness. And so every event that has ever occurred on Earth, and by extension every event that has ever occurred throughout the universe, is recorded within the Akashic. And what I found was that I could access it at will. So if I wanted to find out an aspect of human history, let's say, then all I did was to work through my higher self and could access the Akashic directly. So I didn't need any to go into a trance, or didn't need an intermediary like some kind of spirit guide, whatever. I could access this absolutely directly by myself. And this is what I've been doing for the last 30 years, is investigating the Akashic to try and find what is the truth of human history. And there is nothing in human history that relates to the Anunnaki story in its entirety. There are small bits and pieces that the Anunnaki have pulled together of human and our solar system history, and they have blended it together with their own solar system history. And they have tried to make a new story out of it to make us believe that the Anunnaki are our gods. And ultimately it is a complete fantasy. It is a total fabrication. One piece of proof, as it were, that I came across was somebody who approached me as a client for healing some years ago. Turned out to be Velon origin, but had taken on a human lifetime. There were a number of these Velon on the planet who had managed to find a way of taking on a human body. Again, there's a very long story behind that.
How many of them?
Not a huge number, only about 250, something like that. And he had particular health problems which he couldn't understand. And because of the kind of work that I have been doing with people, I can read people's DNA. And DNA is essentially memory. 75% of all DNA is past life memory. And what this guy carried within his DNA were very strong memories of travelling back in time to Sumeria to translate this story, the Anunnaki story, to the Sumerians. And he was very confused about these memories that were starting to come up within his life. And so basically, as far as I was concerned, it was absolute confirmation that the Anunnaki had travelled back in time deliberately to plant a story that made the Anunnaki the creators of humanity. So the Anunnaki travelled with the Adamu, who were migrating out of Sumeria, and they travelled north and eventually ended up in Tibet, which is where the Anunnaki, the Anunnaki who travelled back in time to take this story to the Sumerians, ended up and remained in the 5,000 years since. And so a lot of channeled work that has come from Tibet. The most famous one, I suppose, was Madame Blavatsky when she set up the Theosophical Society. Her guide that she was channeling was from Tibet, whose name was Jamal Kul or something like that. Was actually a Velon, an Anunnaki, somebody who had remained on Earth for 5,000 years since planting this story within catacombs, I suppose would be a good word for them, within the Himalayan mountains. And so, again, what we have is in the mid-1800s, the beginnings of the re-emergence of the Anunnaki story, but this time through channeled means, through Madame Blavatsky and then Alice Bailey.
Jamie, we understand you channeled two entities, an extraterrestrial calling herself Leah and another entity calling himself the Tibetan. Can you tell us how all this channeling began for you?
Well, trans-channeling actually started happening around 3 years ago. I was sitting in the backyard, everyone else was inside, and I was looking at the sky, and all these clouds started going across, and then one wasn't moving. And I knew for sure that there was something behind the cloud. And so I just screamed mentally, "Why are you hiding from me?" All of a sudden, telepathically, I could hear the voice, now we know was Leah, and she would instruct me on what to do. And it was almost like an enormous wave of love.
Hello, Philip. How are you today?
Very good, Leah. How are you?
Very fine, thank you. So, what is it that you wanted to know?
Where are you from?
I'm from Venus.
I don't think anybody's going to believe that you or anybody else could be from Venus. Could you explain to us how you could be when everybody knows it's uninhabitable?
They think it's uninhabitable because it is not inhabitable by physical life forms. We have bodies of light. They are non-physical. We exist in a dimension that you have not yet encountered, where atoms move so very rapidly that you could put your hand directly through, let us say, a solid wall. There were 6 great civilizations that planted in various portions of your planet genetic seeds. Even your Bible says it, that the race of gods married the daughters of men. And what occurs here on this planet will affect the rest of the universe. Can you, with all of your different ideas, all of your different races, come together as one planet and one people? We have dedicated millennia upon millennia to this idea. The earlier experiments with Pan and Lemuria and Atlantis were not successful. But this one will be.
Since Jamie also channels another entity called the Tibetan, is there any chance that the Tibetan could come through for our cameras right now?
Well, you might have to wait a moment. He's been hanging around, but he wasn't sure this was his time. So.
Well, should I continue on with questions then?
No, I will have to relinquish control and allow his energy to enter. Thank you. I am the Tibetan, and I have come during this time continuum to discuss with you the idea of the only question in the universe. And that question is, what is? And the answer is, I am. For all things that are created, that were created, that shall be created, fall under the question, what is? And you, each and every one of you, are that answer, and that answer is I am. I am is also the name of the creator of this universe. That is all. I relinquish control to the entity, Leah. right, Philip. Do you have another question?
I do have one last question, Leah. I'd like to know, for everybody here and the people who may be watching, is there anything in closing that you would like to say to all of us?
I guess the old fogey said it pretty much all in all, but I guess I might come up with a thing or two to say. This new age is where there will be a race on this planet and throughout all galaxies. And the name of that race will be peace. It's been wonderful spending some time with you. As you take this little piece of information with you, know that you are never alone. You are all connected to the creative source of this universe. And nothing can stop that flow except your denial that you are God. We thank you. Good day.